season. Today we'll be spending some time talking about mental and emotional health. My name is Jenny Harrow, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Integrative Healers Action Network, a disaster response nonprofit that organizes integrative health and medicine practitioners to deploy to a major disaster throughout the state of California. If you're interested in volunteering with us or getting involved, we are still preparing to deploy to a wildfire site if needed this year in California. And we're always looking for more volunteer practitioners and administrative support. So I'll invite you to visit our website, integrativehelersactionnetwork.org, for more information about how to get involved. Today, this is the second part of a four-part series that we're doing this month on fire preparation. For viewers not only here in Sonoma County where we're based, but for viewers really from any part of the country and world. Because as we are all navigating the challenges of COVID-19, the reality of climate change is here. And as a global community, we are experiencing an increase in the frequency and also severity of climate disasters all around the United States and world. The last few years have been very challenging throughout our state of California, with devastating wildfires in our community here in Sonoma County, in Paradise, and in Southern California. Yet, amidst the challenges we are facing, we also have a wide variety of tools and resources to prepare and to strengthen our resiliency. And so this week we have an amazing panel of three integrative health and medicine professionals with a lot of experience bringing healing and supporting mental health for communities impacted by disaster. They will be sharing their perspective on how climate change and major disasters are impacting mental health, and also sharing some tools that you can practice at home to build resilience and strengthen your emotional and mental health during these challenging times. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to invite you, our viewers, to please share your questions with us throughout this panel discussion. You can comment directly on this Facebook Live, and since this Facebook Live may be shared on multiple pages, you can also use Facebook Messenger to send a direct message to Integrative Healers Action Network to ensure that we see your question, and we'll be sharing it with the panel at the end of the discussion. All right, so now I'm honored and excited to introduce you to our panelists. First, excited to introduce you to Ravyn Stanfield. Ravyn Stanfield is the Educational Director of Acupunturists Without Borders, a nonprofit that provides trauma relief treatments to communities hit by natural disasters, systemic oppression, and human conflict. She designs trainings for emerging leaders and healers in the US, Canada, Europe, Nepal, Israel, Palestine, and Australia. She practices acupuncture in Portland, Oregon, with a focus on traumatic injury. Ravyn is the author of Revolution of the Spirit, Fiction in the Rumpus, Guernica, Elephant Journal, and elsewhere. Her background in trauma writing and neurobiology. So grateful for our partnership with you and AWB since our first response in 2017. We have learned so much from your leadership and experience, and we're really grateful and excited to have you here with us today to share your knowledge.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm really looking forward to this incredible conversation.
Thank you. All right, next, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Chris Holder. Dr. Chris Holder is a naturopathic doctor who offers holistic integrative medical care with a specialized focus on treating cancer and neurological disorders. He combines the best of Western medical technology with Eastern philosophy in addressing ailments in the body, mind, and spirit. Self-discovery and patient empowerment are values he holds in high regard. He practices utilizing unique combinations of treatment modalities from around the world to promote wellness and encourage healing. Treatment options include herbal medicine, orthomolecular medicine, IV nutrients, cognitive behavioral counseling, craniosacral therapy, massage, nutrition counseling, meditation, qigong, and indigenous rituals. Dr. Holder relocated to Sonoma County in 2013 to be closer to friends and family. He was recently named the president of the California Naturopathic Doctors Association Board, and Sonoma Magazine has named Dr. Holder as one of Sonoma County's top doctors in 2016. He currently sees patients at Wild Oak Medicine in Santa Rosa, and it's an honor to have Dr. Holder with us here, as he has been one of IHAN's most dedicated volunteers since our first response in 2017. He has volunteered countless hours during multiple fire responses we've had, serving first responders and evacuees during the major wildfires in our community, and we are so grateful for your service and for being with us here today to talk about mental health. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Jenny. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and finally, I'm very excited to introduce Leslie Davenport. Leslie is a psychotherapist, consultant, and educator who brings psychological insights and tools into sustainability-oriented social change. She is a founding member of the Institute for Health and Healing, a nationally recognized pioneer in integrative health. She is the author of 3 books, including Emotional Resiliency and the Era of Climate Change, and is on faculty at the California Institute of Integral Studies, my alma mater, and she was one of my favorite teachers in her course on guided imagery. Her 25 years of medical experience developing an empowering and collaborative approach to resolving crisis has informed her climate psychology model. As a licensed marriage and family therapist in practice for more than 25 years, she understands the health and cultural impact of thoughts and emotions. And a passion for the mystery of the human spirit drew her to become an ordained interfaith minister, grounded in evidence-based and rigorously researched therapies, including cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based therapies, and EMDR. She has braided her expertise with state-of-the-art training into an approach that helps people effectively step into the life they truly want to live. Leslie, thank you so much for the work you have been doing in the climate psychology world and all that you've brought to the field of integrative health and medicine throughout your career. We are so grateful to have you with us here today. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
All right, so we have a few questions prepared, and then we would really love to hear from our audience. I'm really inviting you to join the conversation by sharing your questions with us on our Facebook page. And so, Ravyn, I think we'll start with you. Our first question is, how is climate change and major disasters impacting mental health? And in your experience, what are some common symptoms you see in your practice and in the clinics that Acupuncturists Without Borders runs in our country and throughout the globe?
It's such a big question, you know, really complex, because I think a lot of what we're seeing now, the symptoms aren't quite as severe as, you know, perhaps what we might see in a post-combat veteran, or, you know, someone who has been. A lot of what we're seeing right now around the pandemic, around climate change, you know, around the uprising and different kinds of unrest, is people are not sleeping. People are just feeling general kind of malaise, cranky, frustrated, exhaustion, and not really always able to pin it to an event. You know, in fact, I have people come into my office and say, yeah, I just don't know why I'm feeling so crappy. It's not my immune system. And it's almost like, as a practitioner, I'm often having to remind people what's going on just in the environment, you know, like just what we're swimming in. And people, you know, often, even though we're all aware of it, often to be reminded of it, you know, by another human, people go, oh yeah, that's right. Things are actually quite uncertain and scary. And so maybe there's a reason why I'm not feeling good. So I feel like there's something really insidious about the kinds of symptoms we're seeing, the climate anxiety, just kind of not knowing. I have heard people say, especially in California and Oregon and Washington, where the wildfires have been pretty intense the past few years, even just waking up and the sky is a certain way. People will say they just have anxiety or, and again, a lot of it is low level or panic attacks that come out of nowhere. So I think something that I'm really noticing is that the symptoms don't seem connected to events. There's not a clear cause and effect relationship, and that's throwing a lot of people off. So I would say that's what I've been seeing most recently that seems to be pretty significant.
Yeah, it's this chronic, anxiety and stress of we've been navigating COVID for so long and all the different layers and the roller coaster of it. And I think you're right that oftentimes, and myself included, where I'm like, why am I so tired all the time? And then we forget that like every day it's something new. And we definitely have experienced that in Sonoma County with, we smell smoke in the air, and it's and it just triggers this like, oh, okay, this alertness and adds to the anxiety. Even if things are okay and we're safe, it just adds to that. So yeah, thank you. Chris, I'd love to ask you the same question. What have you been noticing with your patients right now, during COVID, and you've been here in Sonoma County throughout the last two major fires that we've had. So I know that you've been working with a lot of people as they're navigating the challenges of climate change and pandemics. So what have you been noticing?
Definitely Nick, sleep people before. I have had a number of patients tell me that just seeing people walking around in masks was triggering, because the last time we did this was during the fires. So if we have unresolved trauma from that, there can be subconscious cues like mask wearing that may be triggering for some people. I've been noticing a lot of patients with high blood pressure coming in that didn't have high blood pressure before. And that's kind of just, if we're continuously in a state of high cortisol, high adrenaline, blood pressure is one of the first things that goes up. And that's something that's easily measured that I recommend that people consider taking a look at, because sometimes we don't realize how stressed we are with everything. And that can be a good marker to look at.
Great, thank you. And yeah, Leslie, would love to hear from you. Same question of, what have you been noticing in your practice, and then as you've been writing this book on how to build emotional resiliency during climate change, throughout the last 25 years of practice, what have you noticed as climate disasters have been increasing, and how that's impacting people's emotional and mental state of being?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I want to add to what's been expressed so far is that the stress can show up in so many different ways. The insomnia has been mentioned. It could look like a headache, a stomach ache, could just look like difficulty concentrating. It's it's based on so many factors. And the other thing I think that's important is that while there's this collective experience that we are all sharing, that our personal history also plays a lot into it. So do we have already an emotional support system? Do we have physical resources? Is there trauma and distress from our personal history that's unresolved that might make certain things inflame in an even larger way within our reactions? So that I think the levels of distress can also look quite varied. And while I know we're going to be getting to, so what do we do with this and what are tools, I also just want to normalize it in the sense that, if you're paying attention at all, if you have an open heart, if you're sensitive to people, you're going to be feeling distress because it is a very natural response to these, threats that are happening, some quite acute and some more ambient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, of just normalizing this. I think that oftentimes shame can come in of like, as especially if you're like, okay, I'm physically okay, like I still have my home, I still have my job, like, and the guilt or the shame can come in of like, why am I exhausted all the time, or why am I a little bit more on edge than I normally am? And just to normalize that this is completely natural response to a lot of chronic situations that are happening with COVID, and with the the ongoing fire seasons that we've been having here in Sonoma County and all throughout the West, of just always kind of being on guard a little bit. So yeah, and so after just identifying and normalizing that, yes, this is a stressful time, that a lot of people, the symptoms can vary, whether it's, it's feeling a little bit more emotional, that hecticness, and also the physical condition, with Dr. Holder, we mentioned about blood pressure rising, that this is all a completely natural reaction to what's happening. And so would love to go into like, what are some tools and some resources, and before we dive into sharing some practices that people can do at home, and possibly integrate into their daily life, or as they're preparing and navigating the challenges. But before we dive into that, I'd love to just hear, resilience is such a buzzword right now, and increasingly more, I feel like in the last few months, a lot of organizations and companies and individuals, we're talking about resilience, of like, all right, we're building resilience, and we're navigating this and all of that. And so I would just love to hear from each of you what your definition of resilience is, based on your, both your practice and the work that you've done with communities who have been navigating disasters, but also just for you personally as well. Like, what does resilience mean for you? So Ravyn, we can start, or actually we'll Dr. Holder, we'll start with you. We'll switch, so you're not always the first step to go.
Well, I think of resilience is the ability to withstand that which life sends us on our way, mind, body, and spirit. That we've got the physical ability to do what needs to be done, and the mental ability to process what's happening, and the ability to spiritually look at the big picture and find a place for it.
Leslie, what about you? What does resilience mean for you?
Well, I have been reworking it lately, because traditionally, psychologically, resiliency has been referred to as a capacity to bounce back from a challenging situation. And almost the idea of let's get back to normal. But I think it has to be redefined, because normal is being redefined, as we look at climate change and how things are shifting. So, because in a way, we wouldn't want to go back to normal, because we're uncovering the difficulties and the dysfunction within the systems as they're set up. So I've been defining resilience more as an ongoing capacity to be present with sort of eyes, heart, and mind open, even in the face of large life challenges. So it's more this kind of buoyant quality of readiness. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be times to kind of retreat and regroup and replenish, but I think it's moving away from there's an incident, we're kind of knocked down, we pop back up like one of those, balloon doll things, to being more this invitation, maybe requirement, to expand our ability to have a more enduring ability to be present in the face of changes and in the face of challenges.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, where it's like not resilience of not just going back to normal, because it's like you said, like we're in the midst of redefining what this normal is, and rightfully so. I mean, COVID has been uncovering so many layers of systemic injustice in our country, whether it's with racial justice or environmental justice, or all the different things that are happening for communities that are where it's like, no, we can't just go back to normal. And so to bring that awareness and to know that this will be challenging, but yeah, keeping your heart and mind open to navigate. So thank you. All right, Ravyn, what do you think? What's resilience to you?
Well, I'm really appreciating both of these definitions, finding the larger context and then also the ability to stay open, because I feel like, as you were saying, Jenny, resilience as a buzzword, it's a good metaphor, but it actually comes from, in my experience, thinking about materials, so something like rubber, is very elastic, or something like titanium is very durable. And so I feel like we're borrowing that metaphor, to think about something bad happens and then we restore, we bounce back. And I think that metaphor breaks down in a couple of ways, especially because we've found in our work with Acupuncturists Without Borders that health sometimes isn't about the individual just moving through their own pain. There really is, when these things happen, when climate change happens, when systemic oppression happens, it affects communities, and it's really widespread. So it's not just about the individual doing their work and, again, bouncing back, that there really is sometimes ways that entire communities have to transform or adapt. And so there's often, I think, a re-regulation that has to happen, where people can affect each other's nervous systems. We do community acupuncture after disasters, and, for communities that, are experiencing human conflict or extreme fatigue based on something that has been happening to them for a long period of time. And so there's really something about how do we not just restore, but how do we transform and find that adaptation, and then be able to together re-regulate and then find some meaning, and not just the tropes of everything happens for a reason, but what story will we collectively tell about how we responded to this. And that's kind of exciting in a way for me to think, oh, it's not just me going out and doing my personal journey. It really is about, I'm dysregulated. Can I come, into a community, and can we find a healthy way to be together that then gives us that resilience or that ability to transform our response. So I think, as you all were talking about too, just things like when the mask wearing triggers folks to be able to say, oh, that's not just my deficiency, we've all been through something. And so, this is a trigger for everyone. And then I can call my neighbor and say, are the masks getting to you too? Or, did you wake up and see the orange sky? And, and that we can kind of normalize each other and re-regulate each other. And to me, that's just a component that, is a little bit limited in our individual style of healing in this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, of the importance of, the collective coming together and sharing story and sharing experience and working together to build resilience. That came up in our conversation last week about preparing your home and community for fire season, where we were talking to a handful of just fire emergency professionals and disaster management professionals. And that was the theme throughout the whole discussion, was like, we can't do this alone, like, as we're navigating this. And so I'm glad that got woven into this conversation about mental health. You know, I think especially in this country, like we're so individualistic, and that bleeds into our medical approach as well, of like that we're just all these little tiny individuals that have no connection to one another. But what you brought up about, you know, the community acupuncture clinics that AWB runs, of like, it's this web, you know, and how can together we regulate our nervous systems, and then just normalize it. Just even like getting on the phone and saying, yeah, is this triggering you too? And it's like just normalizing it. So thank you all. Those were all such a rich examples of what resilience is. And so with that as a foundation, would love to go into some time for practice, you know, and for just a quick demonstration, or even just sharing just any tools or resources that you find that are really helpful with the patients you're working with in your clinics, or for yourself as well, you know, as we're navigating these challenging times. What are your favorite out-of-pocket practices that people can use at home or throughout their day? You know, we've talked a lot about in other discussions when COVID first started, about the need for people who are first responders or other frontline workers, you know, realizing that are taking care of our health and wellness and our mental health doesn't have to be separate from the rest of our life, like things that we can weave into our daily life. And even while we're navigating the challenges of work and home. And I know that, you know, school is starting right now. And so we have parents all over the country who are navigating the new challenges again of, all right, how do we do this? How do we homeschool, or how do we make sure that our kids are safe as they're possibly going back to school in person? And so, so I know, you know, I hear this a lot of people saying to me, like, I don't have time for self-care anymore. Like, there's just so many other things that feel so much more urgent. But yeah, would love to start maybe with you, Leslie. Just what have you noticed that has been helpful for people during COVID, or, you know, during other climate disasters, or just in your practice in general, of just building, the resilience to strengthen their mental and emotional health?
I do want to share a simple tool, and we'll do a kind of an abbreviated version together. But before I do that, I just have to express some of my enthusiasm for what's been expressed already about the interconnectedness. You know, we've known of that for a long time in sort of a philosophical way and an ethereal way. And it is so practical. And it's one of these things that's just coming to light so much, that is just so vital. And so, as it's been, you know, already described, there's this way that we do self-regulate with each other, you know, and there's a lot of different lenses that it's been described, like limbic resonance, where our limbic systems actually begin to align, or in psychotherapy, there's something called the intersubjective field. So it's not just what gets verbalized, but what happens when two people are relating. And there's a lot that's just kind of at the beginnings of being mapped out, but it really is very far-reaching about the interconnectedness. And of course, it goes to environment and societal systems and everything else. But it's it just feels so vital to this conversation. So had to highlight it myself. I want to share a simple tool. It's a simple adaptation from a trauma approach, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. And one of the reasons this simple approach is so helpful is we've been learning a lot about how stress and trauma is held in the body. It's recorded in our nervous systems. You know, we tend to think of like, oh, we remember events with our minds, but our bodies remember. And so this is a simple tool that includes the body, and so it tends to free things up a little more easily. It can be used with children or adults, and it's been used in a lot of disaster response areas quite effectively. So I'm going to show it. It's called, for children, it's called the butterfly hug, but the tool's the same for adults too. And it's a butterfly because you kind of let your thumbs rest together and your fingertips rest along your collarbone. Yes, you might want to just try this with me. And you want to feel how, if you tap lightly with a couple of fingers, you can feel a little bit of well, you can feel those bony ridges, so it sends a little pulse through the body. And there's two parts to this, and I won't go into a lot of explanation of why we're alternating tapping and things. But the first part is you honor your distress. So you might say to yourself, I'm really frightened about entering fire season. And you notice how your body might feel distressed, or the thoughts that go through your mind. And you just let yourself be with this while you close your eyes or let them have a soft focus. And you're just present to that, you're tender with that, and you tap with that for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And then you pause, you take a couple of full breaths. And then you focus on something that's realistic, but might have been a little bit out of reach in your distress, like, right now, I'm in a safe, quiet place. Something that might bring you into the moment that's true. And you do the same thing, and you notice this different feelings that come with actually recognizing that right now you are in a safe, quiet place. And you tap that in. And by the tapping, it goes beyond just thinking a more positive thought. It helps the nervous system integrate the shift from the distressed story to a more resilient story, especially if it's based in reality, right? So you wanna call on something that's true in the moment that feels excellent. So I'm gonna pause there, but if there are questions about it later, I'd be happy to say more.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the simplicity of that and how approachable that is for kids as well. Of just like, you know, because I know it's stressful for little ones right now, and it's, you know, with everything happening with COVID, and then we've been noticing that here in Sonoma County, and I'm sure among other communities that have been impacted by fires, of just how scary this is. You know, they're so new and fresh. And they're also very resilient. You know, that's one of the amazing things about kids. But yeah, just something that can be done, you know, maybe before they go to school, or even throughout the day, I think is really helpful. And then, you know, for adults too, just to have that simple practice to take a moment to be quiet and notice. And thank you for bringing the awareness that, you know, a lot of times trauma and memory is stored in our body. You know, oftentimes I think, and that's what I'm so grateful that the world of mental health is expanding into a more integrative approach, recognizing that yes, that cognitive therapy and talk therapy can be very helpful, but so much of our being is in our bodies and stored in places that our cognitive mind maybe has no awareness of. So thank you. And yeah, and to our viewers, you know, please keep typing in your questions, you know, especially as we are sharing different practices. You know, if any questions come up, please share them, and we'd be glad to share them with our panelists. So thank you, Leslie. Ravyn, would love to hear from you. What practices have been helpful for, you know, during the Acupuncturists Without Border clinics or your private practice? Anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, again, want to amplify what Leslie said. I think that to really be able to shift out of an anxiety state or a trauma state, because trauma tries to trick us and say that, you know, it's always happening. It's happening right now and it will never stop happening. And I think, you know, to really be able to shift out of that, it has to be somatic. It has to be in the body. We can't think ourselves out of that. you know, because trauma is trying to protect us, to get us to, you know, react and make it stop. So I think the shift has to be body focused. There, you know, probably the first thing that I would say we do in clinics and that I often do with folks in my private practice is just a reorienting, you know, and sometimes that's just finding points of contact with the table or the chair if they're sitting, you know, just really feeling their body against something else, some kind of reorienting to the present sensation that they're having. And then I often like to go to hips, heart, and voice. You know, so we'll often in our clinics use a heart math technique where that was developed by the Heart Math Institute, where it's a two-part process. The first is to focus on the heart and to imagine that the breath is moving evenly in and out of the heart. And then step two is to think of something, you know, uncomplicated that brings you gratitude, you know, like a person or a pet or something that just brings a feeling of satisfaction or gratitude. And even just moving the mind from, you know, trauma is always happening to seeking something that, you know, is better or something that you feel grateful for can be helpful. So I love that heart math technique. You know, the other things I will say when I think about hips and voice is, and this is especially good with kids, to actually shake the body, shake the hips, you know, really reset the nervous system through some somatic movement. That can also help the cardiovascular system reset, to shake from head to toe. You know, sometimes again with kids, I'm like, we're going to do this for 60 seconds and count down. And, you know, as it gets closer to 1, say 10 seconds, now shake as hard as you can. And then the other thing, some of our inheritance from, you know, I think centuries of colonization is that in this country, we don't have a lot of folk songs and we don't sing and we don't hum and we don't make noise together. And actually using the voice to hum, sing, vocalize can also reset the vagus nerve and the nervous system. So again, you know, if you're working with little ones, you humming and rocking, or, you know, a group of people in a room making a hum or a buzz, or, you know, sometimes I'll get silly with people and have them breathe and open their mouth and make a sound that they haven't made yet today. And people make all kinds of crazy sounds, which then will trigger laughter, which also can be a reset. So there's lots of, and again, that collective too, if everyone's doing it, you know, it actually is easy to move past some of those vocal fears that people have around making noise. So all of those are pretty simple, but you know, just exactly what Leslie said, it has to start in the body. It has to be somatic to really get that transformative shift, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you. All of those are just like, yes. Like, you know, we're so grateful to have been able to connect with Heart Math and bring some Heart Math practitioners into IHAN clinics that we set up at the Red Cross shelters. And I love, you know, that their practice really focuses on gratitude as well. And one of my teachers talks about that, of how gratitude is the key to opening the heart. You know, so much can shift with the simple, like just gratitude, finding 1 or 2 things that you feel grateful for, even when things are challenging and stressful. And the shaking is so effective and so simple. If, you know, doing trainings with the Institute for Mind Body Medicine, and I love that shaking practice in between, you know, especially when we're on Zoom a lot right now and just on a computer more than we're used to, of like just shaking in between. And then the auditory as well. You know, we've thought about that a lot as we're preparing for fire season this year, knowing that our clinics will look and feel very different because of COVID-19 and social and physical distancing measures. And so I'm glad that you brought up the Indigenous perspective of healing, of knowing that there's so much there in terms of just of movement and of singing, and how that has, you know, this double benefit of yes, it's able to activate the vagus nerve and all of these different things through humming and things like that, but that it's also weaving in that the collective part of healing as well, tying back in the interdependent nature of us, that we can, it's very difficult to heal on our own. And so when we're a part of a drum circle or something that so many indigenous traditions from around the world have been doing for millennia, there's so much power and wisdom there. So thank you. All right, Chris, I would love to hear from you some practices that have been beneficial for not only your private practice, what you're seeing right now with patients, you know, during COVID and throughout the last few years with the fires, but you've been such an active volunteer with us at IHAN, and seeing, you know, what has been really helpful for people when they're evacuated, when they're at a Red Cross shelter. And, you know, as we know, the shelters are tough, you know, when you're evacuated and in that state of acute trauma and crisis. And then you're in this really kind of chaotic environment. There's a lot of people, and, you know, and especially with this year, there's going to be extra measures with sheltering, with everything that's happening with COVID. And so, yeah, just some really simple practices and tools that people can implement, you know, as we're approaching fire season. And then if we do get evacuated or something, just something that they can keep in mind, you know, that they can practice now. So if and when the time comes, that neural pathway's been developed already of, okay, I know how to do this. I've built some muscle, I've built some strength. So yeah, I would love to hear from you.
I think the first thing that really comes up for me is really thinking about what our own personal family and ancestral history is around this. I'm definitely from a conglomeration of races that have been displaced nearly every generation. I'd have to go pretty far back to think of a time when my family is in one country more than one generation. And so when I see people displaced into shelters, one thing that I found really helpful is to process my own history. That's part of what's allowed me to be able to be really calm in an environment like that, is to realize that sometimes some of what's being brought up to me is not really my current feeling, but what's in my bones, my history. So I try to get people to get a little bit of aware of, you know, where is your family of origin from? Do you know any of the family stories of what's happened to you? Do you know why you're afraid of snakes or whatever it is that's a strong fear, or water for people of color? That's what I had to work on when I was doing my work. Whereas for my wife, she's experienced a fire. And so she's much more sensitive to that than I am because of her family history. So being really aware of that and bringing more of us to the present if we can, with that awareness that I might be a little more sensitive to certain situations because of where my family's been, or even my people or peoples in my cases. So that's something I sometimes talk with my patients about, is how much of our response is gated by really old chemistry in the body, and sometimes updating that software so that we can have possibly a better response. I also honor people in that the response that you're having is probably what saved your ancestors. And so all of us have different survival techniques that, you know, from one person, we might look at that and say, wow, that's crazy. Why are they behaving that way? But that uptick in anxiety and paranoia might have been what saved their ancestors. And so honoring that is something that can be very helpful. And then also empowering somebody to look at that response and say, okay, I also have control here. And if that's not the response we need in this situation, what are our other options? Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing I've been talking to people about is just taking a news fast. I try for a minimum of 1 day a week. I'm averaging 2 to 3, most from Friday to Sunday. I try not to look at social media, the news, or anything like that. The world will still be there, but it gives my nervous system a chance to process the previous 5 days, and come back into equilibrium. So I highly suggest taking news fasts. And another tool I've been using with folks is Tonglen meditation. So it's a 2-word meditation. On the exhale, you breathe out what you're trying to get rid of. So maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's restlessness, maybe it's fear, and then breathing in what you want to receive. And so you just say that one word, calmness, and then on the exhale, what you're releasing. Very easy. Anyone can do it. You can do it anywhere. Doesn't cost anything. And sometimes even as little as 3 breaths like that, you can really feel a shift in your chemistry and feel that calm come in and that presence of being present. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing the ancestral perspective as well. You know, there's so much about, you know, epigenetics and how trauma can be passed on through multiple generations, and yeah, and how certain environments, such as a disaster or other type of collective trauma, that can trigger something that, yeah, that has been inherited that maybe the individual wasn't aware of, but that their ancestors or people of origin have experienced throughout time. So so appreciate that, and just, yeah, normalizing. And I remember when we went to go see Dr. Gabor Mate speak at CIS a couple of years ago, and love his work on trauma and addiction. And I really, what you said reminded me something that he shared of, like, you know, thinking our response and like normalizing our trauma response, that trauma response probably saved us during our own childhood, or possibly our ancestors as well. And so being able to kind of shed the shame or the feelings like that this is wrong or this is bad, where it's like, no, okay, there's wisdom in that. There's wisdom in this response and acknowledging that. And so, and then, yeah, just bringing things back to the breath and intention, and how powerful that can be. You know, we breathe so many times throughout our day, and just to be able to slow down and bring awareness and intention into it is, like you said, it's free and it's simple, and being able to take breaks from social media is something that, I think is such a benefit for everyone. I know that I need more intention for that as well. So thank you all of you for those suggestions, and how broad and rich they all were. And we've got a few questions coming in. So the first one is, creating resiliency during disaster was already difficult, but now that we have some physical distance requirements, are you creating ways to connect with people how are you creating ways to connect with people from 6 feet and with a mask on? That's something, yeah, that's been very present for, I think, all of us right now. So, so this ties into our conversation of, like, the collective healing, and how do we navigate collective healing during physical and social distancing. So whoever would like to speak up about that, any thoughts or suggestions you have about how we navigate bridging collective connection during COVID-19.
I'd like to mention a couple of creative things that have come up in my community. So I'm currently in Tacoma, Washington, and a couple of the things that the neighborhoods are doing, and they're communicating largely through social media groups or something like a Nextdoor, ways of being in touch. One is, you know, one of the activities sort of allowed is walking in the neighborhood, right? It's one of the easier ways to keep a distance. And so a lot of households are putting things in the windows, like teddy bears or things for the kids. And there's also been a certain number of households that have agreed on themes related to homeschooling. So if the theme of the week is gardening, the kids might do a drawing, and all those drawings go in the window. So it's a way for there to be a recognition of kind of a shared reality and shared support. And also on a very practical level, I'm just so impressed with Tacoma has a very large system called Food is Free Tacoma, which is just tables of free food all over the place. Like within walking distance from where I live, I probably have at least 5. And some of it is donated surplus. Some of it is things that other families put out who feel that they're in an ability to do that. And people just, you know, take what they need, leave what they can kind of theme. And it's just, I've just been so impressed, especially being relatively new to this area, to see so many creative ways of community support in ways that, you know, maintain distance, but give you a feeling of we're in this together and we're helping to support each other's needs and, you know, emotionally and the basics. So.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. It's like getting creative of just finding ways to connect and know that we're supporting. And, you know, we saw that a lot here in Sonoma County during the fires of people really going out to meet, you know, neighbors and people that they've never met before, and of just providing any sort of resources and support. I think it makes a huge impact on healing. It's just knowing that there are people maybe that you've never met in person, but that are in your community that are there for you. So thank you. Chris, Ravyn, any thoughts on how to build social connection during COVID-19?
I've really been focusing on eye contact, and I notice other people seeming to seek that out, especially as we're masked up. I think that a lot can be said through very good eye contact, and that we're sort of starved for touch right now, but that is another way that we can touch nervous systems is through good eye contact. Some people are really into words as well. It kind of depends on what your language of choice may be. I like to be touched, and I feel touch starved right now. Other people, though, might be word starved because they're not around people enough. And so I've been trying to make an effort to talk to people that are out there, especially if I feel like they want to talk, and making very good eye contact with the people I come across.
Yeah, I love those suggestions and have been using those. And I think also just in terms of the clinics and things that we've been doing, we've had clinics in Minneapolis, starting in Portland, Seattle, in Sacramento, that have been socially distanced with practitioners and patients all wearing masks. And I think Leslie brought up that interpersonal field between people, and actually having people consciously think about that even though they're far away, that the space between is actually quite active, that there's a lot going on in there. We're still impacting each other's nervous systems. You know, I love what Chris was saying about the eye contact. So there's just so many different ways. I have a friend who has an artist collective called Source Material, and they did a theater performance over Zoom that was incredible. You know, I mean, they actually used the technology of Zoom to, you know, have 6 different people doing the actors were doing different things in different screens. They used the chat box to create a real-time conversation, dialogue between characters. So I also think it's a great time to, even though we're fatigued, to be creative and think about, you know, what do we have accessible to us? What can we put in our windows? How can we use Zoom in ways that are a little bit creative and out of the box? You know, so that's sometimes I think it can also shift the, like I was saying before about seeking, you know, if I'm thinking about, you know, what haven't I done on Zoom, you know, that sort of takes me away from thinking about what a bummer it is that I can't, you know, see people in person. Yeah, so those are things I might offer.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned creativity. You know, I think that creativity is such a key component to resilience, and it's you know, things may look and feel completely different than we're used to, and there's challenge in that, but it also there's opportunity as well of discovering and learning new ways to connect and to use, you know, the resources that we do have available to find these opportunities for that. And so, and I appreciate you bringing up what you guys are doing at the AWB clinics, you know, navigating how that's something that we've been thinking a lot about here at IHAN, of like, how do we run a clinic during COVID-19? You know, and so we're working really hard on all of our different safety and sanitation protocols and ensuring we're following social distancing and all of those different things. And so that's one of the questions that's coming in, you know, to learn more about like what people could possibly do, like if a fire happens this year and people have to, you know, last year in Sonoma County, we had close to 200,000 people evacuate their homes. And so if that happens somewhere in California or along the West Coast, like how do we maintain the social connection, you know, as we're evacuating or as we're navigating, you know, what's happening with a wildfire or things like that. And so, you know, I'm grateful that you brought up the emotional resonance, you know, that people are feeling just even being in a clinic and just being in that kind of energy field of it. But any thoughts or suggestions for our viewers, you know, how to maintain connection during an evacuation or something along those lines?
I could say a little bit. You know, we've already named, Chris already named the how we need to be cautious about sort of overusing social media or the news. But then there's, you know, the flip side too, like how great is it that we can, even Facebook, I think, has the marked safe thing, right? Or the ability to reach out with a simple text, kind of a where are you? I'm here. There's a way that too, that using that appropriately to stay connected, to relieve maybe the worry, like where is this person, is really helpful. And then I just wanted to add another term and concept to the idea of this intersubjective field, which is the commons. So the commons is this idea of our shared natural resources that belong to everyone, you know, sharing the sky, the earth, the water. And that kind of wherever we are, we can visualize, we can conceptualize that we are still all in the commons. So similar idea, but it just kind of stretches it even further. It's kind of like, where would we draw that, you know, it's probably a little like a Mobius strip. Like, is it a circle with an edge, and is it also boundless at the same time? You know, but this way that we're all kind of held in one space, however big that stretches, given a situation.
Mm. Oh, thank you. Thank you all so much. We're approaching the hour, and yeah, I just really want to give my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation for each and every one of you, for the work that you're doing in your communities and your organizations, and for joining us here today to share your wisdom and experience with our viewers. And, you know, before we sign off, just want to share with everyone a little bit more about IHAN and the programs that we're working on right now as we're preparing for fire season. You know, we're still, as I mentioned, we're coming up with our multiple contingency plans of everything from an in-person clinic at a Red Cross shelter throughout the state of California to offering more virtual offerings for people who are evacuated, or likely some hybrid combination of the two. And so we work with a wide variety of volunteer integrative health and medicine providers, from naturopathic doctors, massage therapists, acupuncturists, chiropractors, homeopaths, and then a lot of different mind-body medicine practitioners as well. And so if you're interested in getting involved, we would love to have your support. You can visit our website, integrativehealersactionnetwork.org, to learn more and see how you can make sure that we can help transform trauma into resiliency for communities impacted by disaster. And next week, we'll be doing our third part for this series. We're going to be continuing with more conversations on how to cultivate resilience, and we'll be having more of a focus on physical health with an emphasis on immune support, and then also strengthening your respiratory health as well. So just want to again thank you, Ravyn, Chris, Leslie. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all of our viewers. And until next time, wishing everyone to be safe and healthy and continuing to grow in their resiliency as well. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.